we're just got it. And then
I found a couple of articles and stuff that we can look at, which I think you'll find interesting.
epic. Whoa. God. Whoa, it's the illusion. The delay always gets me. Whoa, it's the illusion and Stuart. And since none of you are here yet, we'll save we'll just chit chat for a moment and let everyone. All right. Gunler's here, right on duty. So this is Stuart and I. We're gonna do a bi-weekly show on Saturday night. Seems like a good night, and it's gonna be more of a I think more of an exploration of the academic, right? I would think.
Yeah, I mean, a little plus some current affairs and that sort of thing.
Good. So in the tradition of this being a co-host, this is Stuart's gonna run the show to a certain degree, and we're just gonna see where it goes. I have no idea what Stuart's bringing to the table or what we're gonna talk about. We're gonna do this thing. But so how you been in the new year?
Yeah, everything's good so far. Yeah, I'm 1 week into teaching. So I got some face-to-face classes and that sort of thing, but looking like some of that will be going virtual for the next 2 weeks.
Really?
Yeah, so already some upheaval thanks to the virus, but yeah, still just out here. Otherwise, all my students seems to be pretty good.
Because you're out in Oklahoma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't Oklahoma, one of those states out there, just fully scrapped all the madness, pretty much, right?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma is one of them. Oklahoma, Texas, most of the southern red states. But now it's just private institutions that are kind of just going this way on their own.
So is it a campus wide like virtual? Mm-hmm. Oh, so they shut the whole campus down.
Yep.
So yeah, for what, like 3.5 people, or was it 400?
Yeah, that I'm not sure. That's a good question. I'm not actually sure how many there were, but it's definitely reaching a point where now you have to seriously ask the question, is it time to start treating this more like a seasonal flu, right? Instead of the end of the world.
Well, that's, I think, what's so interesting. How many, what's the population student body wise?
Tiny, only 3,000.
Oh, okay, I got you. So, but that's still a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. Yeah, but the other big universities in Oklahoma, they've also started doing this as well.
It's interesting watching because actually the teenager just got sent a thing the other day that she's out of class. So we've been getting a bunch of them, but normally it's like she wasn't in close proximity to someone in class, but we finally got one that she was. It's nonsense, but it's MLK Day on Monday. So
I almost managed a whole semester last year with my face-to-face classes without getting quarantined once. Then right at the end, we were for 2 weeks because someone was in contact or contracted it. So yeah, then the whole class is just kicked out and kicked online.
Have you seen the new documentary that came out? It's called I think I send it to you today on Instagram. I was sending it out. It's called Battleground Melbourne.
Oh yeah, you did send me that. Yeah, I didn't watch all of it. I watched a couple of minutes of
it. It's pretty interesting. Battleground Melbourne is it's definitely something. I think that gives it a clear lens that this is not a health issue. This is the globalist takedown.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of ways this could be used to shift to a Chinese style social credit track trace database, the whole of society sort of thing, on the basis of the health monitoring, but then it's everything else that will be tied into it, and how you can survive or not within the society will become dependent upon your rating on some app, which it is for people in China right now as we sit here and talk on this Zoom call, right? You can't do certain things in China unless you have the right score. You can't go and buy a plane ticket or a train ticket unless you have the right score on your social credit app. So there is a very real precedent for this existing, and seems to be creating some not so good outcomes in terms of accountability for government, I think, when you have this ability to completely, like I said, track, trace, and database literally everybody in a society.
Well, that really seems to be the what is going on is this this total intimidation into the system of this kind of cyber gulag, so to speak. That's I think that it's, out here in Santa, like we just pushed, they're just trying to institute the mandates here in Santa Monica, which is, not a small city, but not a large city either. I would say an upper medium sized city. Mm-hmm. And, and it's interesting because, again, is where I've been hammering, and I think we've talked about it a lot, and I made a video about it the other day. It's become quite clear to me that the whole, again, look at the Supreme Court and look at these upper things is all distraction from the real thing. It's all going to come from the bottom up. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be these local city council people that are going to do it. And so I think it was last Tuesday or Monday, my buddy called me up and she was like, because she's a sauce activist, right? But we've been all battling against the school board issue, right? And she's like, what do I do? It's coming into this. They just dropped it on the city council agenda like 2 days ago. And what do I do? It's the city. I go, what's the makeup of your? I don't know. Like, I don't even do city council stuff. And so she impromptu got a protest going on out in front of City Hall and at the mayor's house. And then we called in on the thing. And what was real interesting about it, which got swept over got just missed, is this. It was a city council meeting that ran real late. So when it was at the agenda items, so it didn't come on till about 1:30 in the morning. So it was 1:30 in the morning, and the agenda item, and these were like late submission emergency agenda items, so they didn't get to the regular public disclosure. They only had 4 days, and if you weren't paying attention, you never would have seen it coming. But the agenda item before, which just didn't get any pushback because no one really knew it, but you're sitting there reading all this stuff waiting, was the filling the vacancies of council members and commissioners that have been terminated due to non-compliance to the sauce. So it's already happening on a level I'm not even know if we're aware of, where like they're actually booting people who have been duly elected from these commissions in public office because they haven't complied with the sauce, which like alarm, like I was typing my friend, I go, read the one before, it's even crazier than what we're up against. And yeah, there really seems to be this insane push, man.
Yeah, I think when you kind of started out that point as well, you started out with thinking of like a cyber control grid. I think we're shifting from the cyber into the real world now as well. So there definitely was a cyber control grid that existed, and it's very easy to track and trace people online, right, and see where they're coming from, what they're doing, and that sort of thing. But it was all just that. It was online, and you could leave the online realm and into the real world. But now we're kind of combining these two things together, the cyber control grid with the real world. And like I said, China, probably the best example of this. And yeah, going to have some very real consequences for things like civil liberties. Absolutely.
Well, on this, I got some good information out of it. And Battleground Melbourne kind of alludes to this too, with these sort of Western societies. They can't come from the top. They got to come from the bottom. And if you, for example, the Santa Monica mandate how did they put it? Was basically they aren't doing it where they're out checking people. They're actually like running on complaints about businesses and coming after the businesses to get. So it's not the authoritarian, like on the populist thing. It's coming from inside the community, right? They're getting the community. They're and it makes total sense because it was one of the council members was asking, well, how are we going to, what's the overhead on this basically? And they're like, look, there's not a lot of overhead because all we're going to do is go through the businesses from which limits the amount of people they got to make contact. We're just going to go hassle the businesses and make them comply. And it was very interesting where the whole approach of Santa Monica was like, no, we're not even going to go bug people. We're going to bug, these institutions and have them hassle people. Mm-hmm. It's very evil, like this whole, like the way they're going about it. But I think Battleground Melbourne gives a pretty good lens on just this background divide and conquer from within the population thing, which seems to be where they're going to get everyone to jump on board. Because I've been really noticing, and I kind of is the grift now. I'm calling them the mandate grifters. Is there seems to be a kind of a growing celebrity circuit of anti-mandate people that are out, running all these rallies and they're all the same now. I've noticed after 6 months of this, that they're their own little club and they're hustling their own end. And I really view them as controlled opposition because I do not hear them saying, which is the one thing I think that is the answer to it all, is get to know your local elected representatives and go and meet with them face to face, because on that level, they are you. Like you.
I had a student this week in one of my classes talking about how they have tried to get in contact with local officials and have actually reached a point where they've been banned from City Hall. My response to this student was, well, perhaps you need to be the one who's sitting behind the desk, right? Perhaps you need to be the one who's on the city council. You can't be banned from the city council then, and you can actually change how the city works. So why not go out and mount a campaign and try and shift things in a better direction?
Well, it's this thing too, I think, where you have to like play the game a little bit smarter is you need to approach all these local people as people. Because I think that's where it's all gone off. The thing is everybody and especially on the municipality level comes from the municipality, whether they be, the top real estate agent or the lawyer or the nurse or whatever they are. At the end of the day, they are part of that community. So if you view them as the monolith of the state and approach them that way, I think you're doing yourself a big disservice when I think you approach them as on a very cosmopolitan level and be like, hey, like I'm not here to come with an agenda. I'm here to meet with you to really suss you out. And instead of coming in, I want to talk to you about this, you kind of come up with some more benign issues to get yourself in the door and establish contact with these people versus coming in hot. I think that's the mistake of a lot of people. You come in hot, they can instantly view you as a threat versus coming in as somewhat triple agent, if you will.
That's a really probably good tactic.
Well, I think it's like if you look at how someone like AOC got into power, she got into power by primary, right? Which is again was that thing of come in as act as if, and then maneuver and then get in and then do what you're going to do. I think there's way too, again, that's where I look at this thing as a little bit as a much more subtle art of human relations. And I think that top focus gets people agitated and powerless. And then you got to remove that kind of mentality on the local level and be like, all right, how do I approach someone that for all intents and purpose is my local guy who has all the car dealerships in town?
Mm-hmm. Because that's the thing. Even at the local level, you do have these elite groups that exist, and these elite people that exist even at the local level as well. So it's kind of working and maneuvering your way around that system. But I think it's far more possible to do it at the local level than it is at the state, and definitely at the federal level. At the federal level, it's just honestly a complete waste of time, I think, for your average person.
Absolutely.
So you have to think that you're going to have any influence versus the PR firms, the interest groups, the think tanks, all this stuff. You don't have a chance against it.
Well, it's funny. It's like Santa Monica is not my city council that I focus in. You know, I went to high school there and stuff. So, but when I got on this thing, I got a good look at the council, and it's pretty much a cookie cutter liberal city council. Like it's the same. I know who they're demographically the same. It's, you know, the mayor was your typical person. I won't even get into demographics, but when you like, I think that people don't view it like pragmatically in the sense of like, all right, you got to figure out, you can look at like one of these things and go, okay, that's the dude I'm not going to spend any time on the front, right? Like I see the one who's closer to being swayable, who's more has some thoughts going on. Let me go communicate with them first. And I think what people do is they tend to try to go after the one that is locked in their way of thinking. Mm-hmm. When I go, no, just count them as your no vote right off the bat. Like that.
This is actually also how the professional interest groups, the professional think tanks, the professional PR firms, this is how they work. They do not, right? If I'm a pro-gun group, for instance, right? I do not go out and deliberately try to find Democratic congressmen and convert them to my way of thinking. That's a complete waste of my time, money, and effort. I go and find someone who's perhaps run as an independent or a Republican who sways a little bit to the left and try to bring them over to my position. There's, like you said, there's no point wasting time, money, and effort on these people that are completely diametrically opposed to you. You're not going to change their mind. And in actual fact, you might even end up putting them deeper into the trench that they are already in, right, on whatever issue it is. Right, guns is just one example, but it could be abortion, right, any big ticket policy area. You're not going to convince someone to completely change their mind. Do people do that? Yes, they do. It tends to come around through personal experiences and stuff like that. But no amount of money can really be spent to change somebody's mind. So yeah, like you said, just find that one person who's thinking a little bit differently or a little bit more open and focus your time and effort on them. And I think something else that's important along those lines is thinking about what the media does as well. And we could probably shift into a bit of a discussion on media. There's been kind of a lot. I know you're not a big fan of Joe Rogan, but there's been a lot of shade, to say the least, thrown in his direction. But the media does this too, right? So the media doesn't necessarily tell us to change our minds about certain things. What it does instead is it directs us into thinking about certain topics. So you spend more of your time thinking about, again, guns or abortion, because that's what the media talks about all the time. And then you don't spend any time thinking about something that might actually matter, something where you might actually have a real impact. Whatever that may be, maybe the homeless people in your city, for example, right? How often do we see media reports on that sort of thing? Basically, never. But yeah, media, I think, is important. Social media, these sorts of things, right, where we're kind of trying to change the discussion, I think, are important. This is kind of part of the reason why I'm trying to get back to doing YouTube videos myself now as well. I think because there is somewhat of a niche available for us to have a positive impact. And we did that big discussion on New Year's Eve, right, where we had everybody in this room. And then literally about a week after that, I was watching, I don't remember what it was. It was something on YouTube, but it was talking about the whole problem of people having mental health issues right now because of the disconnect and this sort of thing. And I think the guy was a psychologist or something. And he said, one of the best things to do is this, right? Even if you can't meet with someone physically, talking to someone through these online platforms and using them in this positive function is probably a good idea, not just for your mental health, but to be able to connect you with people that think similarly and to then perhaps implement some change in the world that's going to go in a positive direction. So I think what you're doing here, I think is super positive, and really going to help to maybe create some real change, however minor, right? And some form of a foundation to build upon, I think.
Well, no, I tend to agree with that. That's, you bring up, that's what really kind of, so I had about the Joe Rogan and even this whole thing is, I had a friend of mine who's like in on the fight, about this thing, right? And because this is bigger than, for those of us who kind of are awake, we know this is bigger than mandates and health and all this stuff. There's a giant agenda at work here, and it's pretty hard to see it, how grand the scale is, even for those of us who have been looking at it a long time. And so my buddy was on the thing, and I was calling him about the Santa Monica thing, and he's like, well, and I go, look, why are the people you're working with, why aren't they empowering people on this local level to be watching the agenda items and to be watching the posted agendas and to be keeping an eye on what's going on in their local community versus these big sort of esoteric things, which aren't at the end of the day. And he's like,
that really is that's such a perfect word for it. It really does enter into this esoteric realm when it's so far out of your control and influence. It literally becomes worthless, even getting involved on a mental level.
And well, that was the thing. And the interesting part is he's like, well, my gal I'm working with, she was like one of the lawyers that signed on to the Los Angeles Unified School District thing. And I go, look, man, that mentality of legal actions is last resort. We need to get in front of this stuff. We need to be in place doing all this before we're suing. Suing's like the last Hail Mary resort. Like at that point, it's almost gone too far. And the funny thing is, he said, our backers are kind of set with what they want to do. They're about this informational campaign. And I go, why is the informational campaign about the sauce versus about empowering people to activate and keep an eye on their local city and who these health officials are and all this local stuff? And that's when I got super teed off. And then because he was like, well, look at what Joe Rogan did with what's his face. And the No Agenda guys had done a big breakdown on Dr. What's the guy's name, the mRNA guy did? I would forget his name. Malone. So the No Agenda guys had done a big breakdown on him like a week ago about like that he's basically like a dupe who's just a dude who's like, kind of an abused scientist, so to speak, and now he's sort of under the control and he just wants to be popular. And I was like, look, and my buddy's like, well, you can't like blackpill. Like, I'm not blackpilling. I go, you got to pay attention to who these people are to know where they're trying to move you, because if you think Joe Rogan on any level is anything but $100 million gatekeeper, you will get duped by him not to pay attention. And he's like, but, and I go, well, did Joe Rogan and the doctor, did they break down on exactly what I'm saying? Like that you need to inform yourself. You need to know what's going on the local level. All this information's publicly accessible. Did they do anything? No, they don't. They tell you this sort of esoteric, the problem, and blah, 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 blah. And then it turns into this media hype of like, oh my God, they're causing trouble. And I look at it and I go, those dudes didn't do anything to slow down the machine. It appears they did to the untrained ears, but to me, I looked at it and I go, that they didn't get anyone into proactively participate in their own community and figure out what's going on at the local level where it's all coming in. Most people have no idea who their public health director is at this point. Like, and that's the one calling the shots, and they're unelected. They were appointed.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's who the president of our university was meeting with here on, I think, yesterday. Yeah.
The public health director?
Yeah, making all those sorts of decisions.
Well, and that's when you follow the trail, because then you can find out that those guys all come, like ours. I think our gal, I forget her name right off the top of my head, but she comes from the Kellogg Institute, you know. And you start deep diving on all these things, and you realize the genius of the placement of all these people that have been placed by appointment, and the people that appointed them are all the people that you didn't pay attention to that appointed you. Like, we live in a city of 10 million people who run off the dictates of Barbara Ferrer, right? Well, who's Barbara Ferrer, dude? Well, she was like appointed to this position by these people that you actually could have influenced if you had bothered to figure out who the LA County Commission was. But so I've gotten down on the mandate grifters, because I don't think that they're giving out like valuable information right now, which is everybody within the sound of my voice needs to go get the next city council agenda item or county agenda item and see what's on there, because that's where all the stuff's coming in, because Joe Biden himself said so, 2 days ago, right? He's like, well, we lost the OSHA thing, so on the local level, you guys should all just mandate all this stuff, because again, that does not get slammed by the Supreme Court, because the OSHA thing was a dupe, from what I can tell. It was designed to do that. You know? Yeah,
that's interesting. I think for Rogan, I think like you said, they're not necessarily pushing a solution, which I think is actually accurate, right? When you think about it on that level, but I think they are making people question to some extent what is going on around them. And there was this petition is written, which I think was about 270 doctors signed it or something, right? Trying to get Spotify to shut him down and to take these podcasts down and that sort of thing. I think there is somewhat of a fear that there will be a critical mass of not necessarily action, but thought that goes so far against what they're trying to implement that it becomes impossible to implement. And just generally, and I guess this is probably the academic in me speaking, I would like as many voices as possible out there speaking. So anyone that's threatening to shut voices down, I think is extremely dangerous. And I think I mentioned this again on that New Year show that we did. I've kind of grown up with this very critical perspective on foreign policy and international politics and how the world works, specifically American foreign policy, right? I was a 9/11 kid. I was 10 years old when that happened. Remember coming home from school, seeing the second plane hit live on TV, and seeing everything that played out after that, the wars, the devastation, the destruction, right? And all of the claims that were made. One big one in England was that Saddam Hussein can hit London in 45 minutes with a missile. That was the big one, that he could hit London in 45 minutes. And then, we go through this whole process. No WMDs. Iraq is falling apart at the seams. Rise of ISIS, all this sort of stuff. So one of the key reasons I wanted to go as far as I have with education, some of it has been somewhat inadvertent, right? I didn't mean to necessarily end up with this many degrees, but I wanted to go the doctorate route so that I would have standing, essentially, right? I'd have an authority to speak on these topics and say something that's different to what everyone else was saying on them. And I think we're almost reaching a point now where it doesn't even matter what credentials you have on a topic, right? As we see with some of these doctors, some of them are literally the most highly published doctors in their field. And we just instead have, well, you're outside of the narrative which the elite establishment is trying to push. Therefore, everything that you have done personally to put yourself into a position of an expert doesn't even matter. So I think that is dangerous. That's really dangerous to try to shut down any sort of debate, but it's especially dangerous to try to shut down experts that try to present a critical opinion on a topic. And there will always be critical opinions on topics, and they should be heard, I think.
Well, I think, I see it like, if I pull the lens back, is one of the things is I've been noticing is, what is it a war on? Like I think the real war is on science. I think if you look at the overusage of that word and and it being used around non-scientific method, and the fact that all these people are ultimately discrediting themselves while they're the arbiters of science, I think what they're really trying to do is discredit the whole scientific method. So I went to college for chemistry, right? So I believe in science, and as a Christian, Christianity and science totally merge. They're very copacetic if the science is done in the name of truth, right? Of trying to find actually the secrets of our reality versus the laundering of money. And I think that where we've seen this now is that science needs to be corrupted in order for the laundering of money not to be exposed. Because if science actually breaks free on this, we're all going to sit back and everyone's going to be like, oh, wow, this is what we've really had access to the whole time. Like, oh man, this is what's been sitting in the US Patent Office the whole time. Oh, whoa. And who are these guys now? And I think they have to tear the whole thing down to get everybody just so gobbledygooked in their head that they can't articulate. So the expert comes on and they're like, yeah, so what? Idiocracy 101 is, yes, so what? Like, so what?
Yeah.
And the other war I see that seems to be quite obvious is that it's a war on women, man. Like, full-blown war on the feminine. And I mean, like, real women energy. It seems like every aspect of this is to crater the whole woman, and the woman is the heart of the whole human experience, And I think that's where you get that weird discrediting with science. I mean, you look at this whole thing as it can't be science if we're not going to talk about true health remedies, right? Like, I mean, I'll give Rogan a lot of credit on that stuff. Like, he does bang the gong about, health.
Because I watch a lot of British news reports online, right? So I'm in Oklahoma, but I try to keep up with it. The only thing you ever hear them talk about is the V word, right? That's all they ever want to talk about. That's all the politicians ever want to say. They never want to bring up anything that could be another factor that's important in either why someone's in hospital or how they could keep themselves safe and prevent themselves from getting to hospital in the first place. And that is, very strange. But for again, just on this science topic and this science idea, sometimes there are two different ways of viewing the world, right? So I view the world through this lens of elitism, right? That's how I try to understand and define the world, that it is, for the most part, controlled by and for elite interests, which take many different forms. But there's other people, for example, I know a friend who's a graduate school at a university here in the United States, who said that they had a professor who came to interview for a job there. And one of the things he said was, well, unless you're studying representation, why are you bothering to study anything? So there is this kind of distinction between worldviews And sometimes you can't reconcile them at all, right? They're always just going to clash into one another. So you can see points of one sometimes and points of another other times, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? To be able to have a more nuanced view of the world and society and how it works and operates that says, well, sometimes in some cases, democracy works and democracy plays out, like at the local level, like you've been saying. But in other cases, well, perhaps it is more of an elitist system, and perhaps democracy doesn't really exist, and perhaps it's more of an illusion. And instead, the system is working for those other interests. So, yeah, I think this is kind of the same thing with the physical sciences to a degree. So we have these theories that are put forward, right? And they are kind of held up on a pedestal, but there are always going to be people that are trying to chip away at that pedestal and trying to challenge it in some way. So I'm just really confused as to why people generally can't accept that there can be conflicting views, and that can't always necessarily be reconciled, but that's not necessarily a bad thing either, right? There's just this complete lack of nuanced thought in the world right now, and that is, again, for me, very disturbing.
Well, I think you nailed it on the head as a person who people want to it's funny. I joke with my other friend who's I consider myself like a true liberal, and on like not the new liberal, which is woke liberal. I mean like a liberal, like the original concept
Classical
of the liberal, like a thinker liberal, and open to new ideas and willing to change my point of view and about my castle, but accepting your castle and all these things. And I was talking to my friend, she's very affluent, and I was like, isn't it ironic we're now right wing? And when the reason we're right wing is because we have not abandoned our core principles. I've never abandoned my anti-war stance. I will not abandon that on principle alone. Is war is an obsolete concept in today's reality. There's no excuse for it. And then I'm also like an avid environmentalist. Like you're not going to get me to sit here and say the electric vehicle is a good idea if you're an environmentalist. If you're an environmentalist, it's wholesale Armageddon on the planet. And these ideas
just go look at what a lithium mine looks like.
Well, that is that's why, like over there, you're very geopolitical. As you look at what goes on in Bolivia, right? People aren't paying attention to why Bolivia is such an interesting thing and why the political power in Bolivia is so important. Well, it's where all these minerals are. So you look at these places on the planet right now, which are very much in flux, and
I don't know about maybe Kazakhstan has maybe got some interesting minerals. I have no idea, but that might be
Kazakhstan is a huge mining of crypto, and it's this weird thing where you take the nuanced approach, like for me, I found one of the topics, and this is it gets so off into the weeds of a certain thing is the realm we exist in, right? To ask the critical questions and who's screaming what. The more people scream at me, the more I ask the questions, right? And so when I begin to observe the realm I'm in, I have more questions as a person who studied science and college and stuff about the world I live in than I used to, taking their model verbatim, because their model is being propped up by the same intellectual class now that is being discredited full-heartedly in public view if you're paying attention, which I think, again, is very interesting from an observational point of view, is how a society can be, I don't really trip on the right so much. I do trip on what was once the liberal class in the society of suddenly now accepting the largest, one of the most evil corporate structures on the planet as the savior to this reality. Like Santa Monica, for example, and this is what I said to on the public comment was, I really find it interesting that a completely liberal city like Santa Monica would actually be talking about instituting segregation within its societies on behalf of one of the most evil corporate structures on the planet, the pharmaceutical corporation. Like, how did you guys lose your soul on this deal? And it's very, very much this, like you were saying, this non-nuanced approach to understand that, like, you as a human being can operate in two opposing spheres of ideology at the same time. People don't want to.
With my students, for example, I teach them a textbook, and I teach, which is called American Government. It's basically how everything should work. And I also teach them The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills, which is Mills's interpretation of how the American system actually works. And then we can compare and contrast, right? And think, well, this says this says that. Which one do we think is most applicable in any given situation? And yeah, just generally, I think the more you learn, the more you should question. And I'm not sure why people are not doing that. Perhaps because they're not actually learning anything, right? Perhaps they're not actually learning their capacity to think critically. They're not learning anything that's a new aspect of knowledge that's coming towards them. Instead, they're just being presented with something, digesting it, and forgetting about it.
Well, I kind of have a thought about that, right? Like when you take on that exercise of learning and being like, there comes a certain level of responsibility, and that to learn something new against your old set of ideas and values and where it is you have to take on a certain level of responsibility for being in that camp, especially if you've done damage, whether that is ostracizing, name calling, all of these things that we can do as human beings, or even just thinking negative thoughts about someone, that when you accept these new ideas and you're like, oh, I was wrong. Well, what does that mean that I was wrong about my perception of reality? Did I actually, now I have to kind of go in and ask myself some deeper questions about self and go, well, what did I do with this information? And how did I treat the world at large? And, oh, wow, I have to take responsibility for myself, because if I by reading some new information and getting some new facts can have a new perception of reality, right? That is me 100%. That is not it's not what I read. It's not what I used to think. It's me sitting in real time and space going, oh, I have a new perception of the world based upon this new information. And then really the responsibility of you being a human being in this realm comes very obvious to you, that it isn't them, it's you. And when I think you get to that, people get terrified of you're responsible for your own perception.
Yeah, also what you said is perfect. Your responsibility of being a human being. And this is actually what separates us from absolutely everything else on this planet. The physical sciences, right? They look at rocks and chemicals and these sorts of things. Those things don't change, right? Gold is gold no matter what. Silver is silver no matter what. All these different chemicals, they're going to be the same chemical no matter what, right? And how do
wait, I got to put it in this time, at this point in time and space, because all these things are energetic forms at this moment. But
yeah, but for humans, we can change like this.
Sure.
Right. That's how quickly we can change. So because of that, we have to be, I think, consciously aware of that fact and try to incorporate that into how we think and how we act in the world. and the sorts of consequences it can have when we can change that quickly, because it can have super negative or super positive outcomes depending on how we choose to react to a changing knowledge.
And that's, I think that's what's so fascinating about this whole thing of I saw it in 2000 at the end of 2015 after the election. I saw people that were that I thought, ideologically speaking, lived on a certain realm of existence of do no harm, educate. We lead by example. Our job is not to intimidate. We're supposed to be on this higher plane where like violence is not the answer. It's been proven over and over again. It's just a tool to keep the system up and running. And then when I saw people that I knew as what I would call peace-loving people actually advocating for the death of another person based upon political and propagandistic leanings, I was horrified, because I was like, whoa. But I had to ask a lot of questions. I go, well, why am I not that way? And I go, well, and I talk a lot about it. I had to experience my darkness in the 90s in the old growth forest and decide who I wanted to be in this life and take responsibility for myself. And I saw a bunch of people that had never truly understood the darkness they contain and had always believed that they lived in this bubble of righteousness, if you want to say. And all of a sudden, like the tables had turned and they suddenly got validated to express this violence. And I look at that as the beginning of the pandemic. Like the actual, when you get into the whole thing with the whole deal with the psychosis, what is it? The mass formation stuff. I go, those tracks were laid 4 or 5 years ago. And it's just now they greenlit it through this pressure, because all the people that had experienced the mass formation had just been dormant, essentially, and waiting to be activated. And it's like they just flipped the switch and we're like, all right, and now all these people are running amok. Crazy.
Yeah, I came to the US in 2016. Yeah, 2016. Yeah, the year of the election. And that was, I think, like you said, the culmination of a whole lot of different pressures all at one point. I think of social media, especially. I think that was the ultimate outcome of social media on society as well. This creating this clash, because online, it's totally fine to just go out and blast people and say whatever you want. And I think in 2016, we saw that transfer into the real world. This actually seems to be a general theme of this topic, which of our chat here tonight, which I think is actually really interesting. This transference from the cyber to the real world, right, and how that actually plays out differently and somewhat more dangerously when we get into the real world. I remember being on the campus of the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, which is where I was for a couple of years, when the election happened and there were protests and that. I obviously went out and tried to talk to people and that sort of thing, like, why are you here? What do you think? The odd Trump supporter that I found was afraid to talk if there was anybody else around us. So there was this very real shift in debate and what was or was not acceptable in political debate around then. And yeah, I think, like you said, that probably is this kind of the starting point of this race where we're now at of political conflict.
Well, that's where I think it's interesting, where you talk about like these, where we're at with this thing is people being afraid to look deep into themselves and ask who these characters are and who the Orange Man was and who these players are. And if you most people's clock, when they had to really pay attention to reality, was somewhere around March 13th, 2020. And I go, as a person who's been watching this and observing it for a long time, I go, I go, well, if we take the clock back a little bit further, like a lot of these kind of monolithic thoughts had really entrenched at that point, and the people that have showed themselves to be the cucked monkeys, if you will, were the exact same people that had been peace and prosperity and like everybody live and we all want to be equal in 2015, and they got greenlit. Something I watched it like in the streets in front of me, like whoa, because I was all involved in Standing Rock, and I was a Standing Rock guy like a year before. Like that's like if you want to talk about like what I'm about, is about the clean water. And you talk about the original people, like that's where I find it interesting. We live in the woke culture will not touch the genocide of the original people in North America. They won't go anywhere near it. They'll stay in these sort of artificial constructs of the 1619 Project and all these sort of woke history things, but they will not touch the genocidal nature of our government during the mid 1800s, because it throws directly in their face who deserves reparations. It counters their whole narrative. That's why they don't touch the Civil War anymore, man. They move as far away from the Civil War as possible.
Standing Rock's also an important one because that's where we really saw the military industrial complex come home, right? The private military companies that were out there, the drones that were out there.
We also saw the real fortitude of people united beyond demographics. I mean, you had people coming from all over the world. You had the issue is about clean water, historic indigenous land issues. But underneath the surface, if I tried to talk to it and I kept going, is follow the money. I go, this seems to be like, because at the same time, there were a number of other pipelines that were going through equally sensitive areas, the Pecos pipeline down in New Mexico, and that at the same time, and there wasn't getting this thing. And you realized that it really had to do with the railways not wanting a pipeline to shift their economics off of the railways and who was funding. And but that aside, what with the people power that showed up in North Dakota, I think alarmed the system in such a way, because I do believe that one of the things that sort of gets swept under the rug is the metaphysical power of humanity in contact with God and Mother Earth and all this stuff is highly overlooked, but the elite seem to be quite aware of it. I think the general population just kind of bypasses it.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I was trying to say about with the Rogan phenomenon. This is creating a critical mass of people that, again, like you said, they don't have the answer to the problem, but at least they are saying that is a problem. And that's, like you said, dangerous for these establishment forces.
Well, it's, the 100th monkey principle, right? Like it eventually like gets such a critical mass. But I think what concerns me about like a guy like, and I've always found, especially with what I've always tried to do here is if you're trying to be a leader without empowering everyone following you to be a leader too, I don't think you're doing anyone any service. I get the critical mass thing, but if you're not convincing everyone to go be their own autonomous cell in the collective and to truly empower themselves and move away from the demagoguery, I think that's what's led us here is someone's going to save the day. Oh, Rogan's going to save the day. Rogan's not going to save the day. You're going to save the day by realizing that the buck stops with you and stop looking for alternatives outside of you by exploring the landscape, right? Like, and I think that's why I was fired up for us to do a show, is because you have to know the horrific nature of the landscape we're up against to actually be able to navigate it. You can't pretend we're in a a fertile valley crescent in full of abundant land. We're literally walking through a lava field in a barren desert with extreme hot and extreme cold at night. And we better be like prepared how to navigate through this treacherous terrain. It's not a negative. That's a positive from my perspective. Because they've set up playing field.
Yeah, definitely. And again, academics have written about this sort of thing. Theorists, C. Wright Mills, one of the ones that I've spoken about. I would highly recommend you read that book, The Power Elite.
Power Elite, C. Wright Mills.
Yeah, would highly recommend. So he wrote it in the 1950s, and it's really just his analysis of American society and how it had changed so much after World War II in particular, but it had roots that go back further than that in terms of these elite groups and elite interests. There's some historical stuff in there that's kind of fun to read, but there's a lot of just conceptual stuff that is so applicable to today that it's just crazy. And one of the things that he talks about specifically is this idea of a mass society. So it's no longer a group of individuals, but it's just this mass, right, that gets pushed around, squished into a shape that the actual people with power can actually squish it into. And then it's used to ultimately justify what those people in positions of power want to happen. I got some notes on that here. Actually, we could go through some of these. You might find these interesting.
Let's do it.
So he talks about what a general liberal society should be, first of all. And he says the assumptions of a democratic society is really what you call these. So the individual is supposed to be the ultimate seat of justice and judgment within a society. There's supposed to be a natural harmony of interests among people, so we can naturally figure things out and come to legitimate conclusions on our own. There's rational discussion between individuals that would determine action. So again, absolutely not what we're seeing today, right? And not what we've been talking about here in this session either, right? The complete lack of this. And also that what is true or what is right would not only be determined, but it would be acted upon, which I think is going to this Rogan thing, right? It's not just, well, you can say that's right, but what are you actually going to do to get there? So yeah, he tries to explain why this collapsed. And he says that it ultimately means that there's been this collapse of individualism in the United States. And he kind of puts it down to three different reasons. The ratio of opinion givers to opinion receivers. So we're kind of massively out of whack with that right now. We only have a few opinion givers, right? And everyone else is the receiver. You're just on the end of the message that is being literally you're being knocked over the head with. The possibility to answer back to an opinion without reprisal. This we're absolutely seeing, right? You can no longer answer back to a lot of these opinions without reprisal. And also his other point, the ease or lack thereof of opinions shaping decisions with powerful consequences. So unless your opinion can shape a decision that has powerful consequences, your opinion is worthless. And of course, he's made the case that most people's opinion would fall into that category and is therefore worthless. And he puts a lot of blame on the media for this, and the fact that the media works to spread this message of the power elite ultimately ends up creating this mass. And he gives a really interesting also critique of the mass society itself. The only qualifications that you need really is age and citizenship. So if you're 18 years old, right, and you're a citizen of the United States, well, all of a sudden you're supposedly bestowed with this power that you can vote, and your vote matters. But does it really matter? And is that actually somewhat of an issue otherwise? And yeah, he's just it's a really kind of powerful chapter where he just goes through this massive critique of the direction that society has been going in. He goes as far as to call the public passive and helpless as well. So he actually takes kind of a more negative stance than I think you would, right? Whereas you're arguing we're not passive and we're not helpless. He's actually more on the negative side of things. And he thinks the public is, for the most part, controlled and directed not only by these elites, but by things that don't matter. He has a really interesting quote somewhere in there. I forget the chapter, but it's about the idea that he says something like a man that can knock a small white ball around some grass and knock this ball into a hole can get a meeting with the president, but you cannot. And he's getting into this whole idea of the celebrity society and the society that
I would agree. I think on that one is that's my main point, is to break that mold, because I see that's exactly what the breakdown of it all is this is exactly that, as everybody's given their power to the guy with the little white ball because he can go meet with it instead of validating it, like, take the ball. Mm-hmm. You be the ball.
Yeah. Have you seen, and probably a great example of this, have you seen the big scandal back in the United Kingdom right now with Boris Johnson?
And the partying? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's of course, it's rules for me, not for thee. I mean,
yeah. So this is a fantastic example. Some of your audience probably hasn't heard much about this. I haven't really seen any American news outlets covering this at all. But it's come out that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and members of his government, and also different government departments as well, they've held at least 14, was the last number I saw, but I think there have been more that have been found since then, 14 parties, while the rest of the country was living in a police state. So this is literally the best modern example of a power elite playing out right before our very eyes, right? These are people with the ability to make decisions which influence the entire country. Everybody else has to live by them. They themselves can do something completely different. While you are stuck in your home, you can't even go outside for more than once a day for exercise. Well, they're having a bring your own booze party, right? That's literally what this email said. It said bring your own booze. So yeah, this is just it's kind of unbelievable, but I just put out a video saying that you shouldn't be shocked by this at all.
No,
because this is
one bit.
No, like, you should be outraged. You shouldn't be shocked, because this is exactly what you should expect an elite class to do. It will make rules that you have to live by, and it will not live by them itself. And the idea that we were all in this together, complete fabrication. And people that have my kind of political outlook, right, would have said that from the very start.
Yeah.
But to actually get that across to someone, you need an example like this. And I think this is going to do significant damage to political credibility.
Well, I do think that we're seeing, I think we're seeing it all across the board. That's why, like, again, this Battleground Melbourne is, that's a major documentary that comes from within. And it just shows you the utter disdain and incompetence. And again, that's why I've been I believe that, like, the thing that if they got everybody to see what is going on the local level, it's right there too. Like when I watched the Santa Monica City Council meeting, these were all new people, so I had a fresh perspective, right? I didn't know any of them. And I watched the incompetence of the system. That's my one thing that I see is, as much as there is an elitist plan in place, it is still based upon the folly of idiots. Like, they're still 100% dependent upon people that on their very basis are attracted to these civic positions, not because they want to, like, participate in civic positions. It's because they ultimately are fulfilling some sort of, like, less than reality where they need to be like, you watch the mayor of Santa Monica, you just know that's who this woman is just somebody who is so desperate to be invited to the party that she found her way to be like, hold her gavel over everybody else. And that is, and in itself is like, she's in, like, you can listen to her and just be like, this woman doesn't know what she's talking about. She doesn't know what but if you're not witnessing it, she ultimately has all the power if you don't witness it. And I'm a firm believer that like, going with what you were, the C. Wright Mills line about the people is that's where it lies, is they're doing all this in plain sight, and people just aren't paying attention because they're like, that's like, and I go, that's exactly why you should pay attention. These are the worst of the worst. These are the people you shoved into the lockers at high school, and they're exacting their revenge upon you. And hey, hip, cool, happening people, do you really want to be like led by the nerds? I mean, look at Boris Johnson. That dude has never been cool.
Yeah.
He tries, but he ain't. And
no, he's the stunt man. He's the class clown.
Yeah.
He's the guy that literally went on a zip line from something in London down to the bottom, waving two flags.
Well, I remember when he was like the whole big deal with him being the mayor and the whole thing. And I think that where people have misplaced their thing is they're basing it upon someone else's perception of reality, you know, and that's what I find to be troubling with this sort of Rogan-esque demagoguery, is like, well, let's look. And I go, that dude knows nothing about he might have known what it was to be a struggling comic in Boston 30 years ago, but that dude's getting there, talking to that dude, smoking a blunt and hopping in, going into his garage and deciding which of his like $500,000 to $1 million sports cars he's going to go rip around in the Texas Hill Country, dude, listening to his music on his way to eat, you know, $1,000 dinner. Dude, like, yeah, like, let that guy save you. Right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what's going on, I think, with Boris Johnson and all of this. But yeah, one of the big points is this would have happened no matter what. It's really important to get outside of this left-right paradigm. This isn't just because this is the Conservative Party, the British Republican Party, right? So it's really easy for people to fall in this.
This is humanity. Like, I think that's where I try to talk to people about this. I go, look, if I was in charge of the deal, right, and this had gone down, and so you saw the big incident with like when the pandemic started and they shut all the beaches down and that big swell came through. Dude, if I was running the show, I would have been out there surfing and and I'm a nice guy, but I still would have gone like, so let me get this straight. Like, I have the clout to do that. I'm going to go do that because that's why I advise everybody to seek their civic duty. That was the whole concept, I believe, of our framing of the government, is if you do your civic duty and you participate, you will find that you have the controls, the levers of control, just like everybody else, which will give you the ability to go do what you want to do, as long as you're willing to operate in this community of people that also have the levers of control and also have personal responsibility to defend themselves and justice and community and all these things. And that's where I tend, because I look at my own experience, right? Like during the pandemic, on two things that affect people, I was able to direct influence. Like, I was able to like direct the influence of the mask mandate and hold that off for 3 months or 2 months. And then I was able to get this letter passed from the city pushing back at the right time about the school mandates things, but that didn't come that the only way the vote worked is because as a voter, I was participating civically within the system. And I think that's the interface that C. Wright Mills might be talking about, is like, if you think your vote counts without your participation in the system, it most certainly doesn't. Mm-hmm. Because when you participate in the system that is our form of government, you realize what your vote does and doesn't do, and you realize how important it is to vote and know what you're participating in, and therefore you will affect the system because you're in the system too, affecting it by your presence within it. And yeah, this thing, it's it's like the joke they say, it's, as everybody talks about like free market economies and this and that, it's sort of the same thing as the representative republic and democracy and all that. And I would argue that I don't think in my lifetime we've ever seen either. Mm-hmm. I don't think we know what capitalism is. I don't think we know what a free market economy is, because I've seen nothing but corporate welfare for my entire life, based upon the tax dollars inflating too big to fail corporations and bailing them all out, and the EPA super funds covering their ass, and all of it. Look in the national forest, and then you on this, I don't believe that our form of government works without massive civic participation. And I don't think we've ever really experienced it in my lifetime, because we've left it up to the professionals who are more than gladly willing to get paid. When our country, a true democracy or representative republic, is based upon volunteerism. I'm willing to go do my civic duty for a couple of years and be the carpenter who goes to Washington, not because I'm looking to cash in the check, but I'm going to make my community better, which will make my life better. If I go and represent my community, make my community better, my life will get better, because we'll be more prosperous together. And if we're all doing that together, wow, what we could do. I do. I'm one of those dudes who is a little pie in the eyes, sky, pie in the, whatever that statement is, because I truly see the potential of what we could do if we just stop looking to someone else to do it.
No, I definitely totally agree, but I think it's a bigger problem than that. Just as you were thinking, we've kind of we've abdicated responsibility in practically all levels of life. It's not just the political level, it's everything that we do. We've given up responsibility and let someone else do it for us.
Well, that's birth control, public education, traffic cops, the health organizations, water filters. Well, I mean, water's my big thing. Is there's nothing that abdicates societal's responsibility for drinking water like water filtration. You know what I mean? We'll just put it through the cleaning and this and that. It's like, how about we protect where the water comes from, and look after our watersheds? But that's crazy talk. Get your Brita water filter.
Yeah. So in terms of solutions, like I think I said at the end of that New Year's Eve presentation, I haven't got any solutions, because I think it is a far broader issue. Like you said, just all these other areas that are kind of just we've given up, so to speak, to a great degree, or most people have.
Well, I see. I tend to think of it as a little bit. I think there is a solution, and I think that it's a personal solution. And I believe that it's sort of what I've been trying to do here, and what why we're even having these conversations is we don't need them, right? So to speak. They are running the show. They control the power lines. You're not going to beat them with cryptocurrency and any of that. We're not going to beat them. But what we can do is peaceably just move away from the thing and establish ourselves not as against them, but as just not worth the trouble. And I think the system ultimately implodes itself out in a weird thing. Like I was listening to someone who was about like the Supreme Court thing. And like, yeah, like now we need to go after, blah, blah. And I'm go, why are you so in it? No, it was this thing where this guy was like, Biden, because of the Supreme Court, Biden needs to apologize to all the people who were fired and rehire them. And they need to get back pay and all this stuff because now the Supreme Court, and I just was like, why do you want to participate in a system that is now blatantly shown that it hates you? It doesn't like you. It doesn't want you. It doesn't need you. It doesn't care about you. And why not take what I understand is these documents, the Magna Carta, the Constitution, the law, all these things, and take all the stuff that is what it's about and leave the system, which isn't about that. We don't live in a legal, lawful, constitutional system anymore. We live in this corporate oligarchy of military, industrial, pharmaceutical corporations. So why are we trying to stay in it? And instead of just going, you know what, dude, you guys do your thing. You guys are such bad juju and weird and freaky and creepy. You guys just eat yourselves. We're going to go over here and we're just going to kind of like scale down and be like, okay, you know what? Imagine what our late 1800s reality would look like with our knowledge right now, right? Like most of us have such knowledge within ourselves that we have yet to truly utilize it in the actual playing field of like creation of new systems, so to speak. And I go, our baseline knowledge as modern people in the Western world, compared to where these guys were in the let's say 1870, is immense. Our ability to build things and problem solve and clean things and fix things and jerry-rig things, the amount of resources we have just that are pre-built but dilapidated. Like imagine what we could do if we just walked away from it all and took some skill saws and some welding torches and just we're like, you know what, we'll buy that land that one of my big things, Stuart, is I've been about for years now, is purchasing landfills pre-60s and finding where landfills were before all the weird chemicals and plastics get installed that are just these hardened metals and glass and all these things and getting these things and pulling all this stuff up and finding all these, those tractors from the 1920s, they can be unseized and made to work again. Like, I think it's sort of that future primitive steampunky sort of thing, of going, no, like we're gonna have steam powered engines and to get to the next level of it all. Call me call me a dreamer. Call me a dreamer, dude.
No, it's definitely good to dream for sure and think these things through. But yeah, something that I think is interesting about that is why haven't we tried to change and organize our society in a different way at all over the past 100 years? Why isn't
fear? I think it comes down to fear of personal responsibility because of that thing you were saying where we've abdicated our authority to such a level that most of us are so it's this thing of like, why is a liberal who's never held a gun afraid of a gun? Because they're actually afraid that they're going to lose their mind and kill somebody with it. Someone who actually is responsible and knows about a gun I'm not worried about it. Like, but someone who has never touched one, they actually think that they could get drunk and like go crazy with it. And that's why they're afraid of it. And I think it's the sort of the same thing with this personal responsibility stuff is people are afraid that they will become lunatics and not know what to do with personal responsibility. Because I think, and I know that there are no rules.
Mm-hmm.
There is only consequences. And most of us aren't going to go do certain things because I just don't want to deal with the consequences. But if you wanted to go be a serial killer, there's nothing stopping you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if you wanted to go be a Johnny Appleseed, there's nothing stopping you. Like,
that is super important, because I kind of sit here before you as someone that dreamed big. All right, I always wanted to come and live and work in the United States. I wanted to pursue this academic stuff. I wanted to get a job like I've got now, teaching, right, and having tons of free time to do research and this sort of stuff. And I've managed to manifest all of it. Right, it doesn't just pin out of thin air. It doesn't appear out of thin air, but you have to think of a pathway to get there. But I think if you find a path to where you want to be, and you stick to it and you work hard and give it your effort and where you want to be, you will reach it. So maybe if you apply this logic, what is that called? Law of attraction, something like that?
Oh, yeah. For sure.
So if we apply that not just to an individual level, but to a societal level, well, then maybe we can get to where you want to be with the 1920s tractors and the steampunk world.
Well, I think that it's gravitating. I think it's already splintering off. I think there's already groups of people doing it. I mean, you look at some of these people out there, they're already doing it. Like they're figuring out how to alter their supply lines and get way more. They're not, and their big thing is trying not to tear down the system, because you need the system to stay intact to keep the idiots entertained. Like that's the big thing, is like, you had all these right wingers and all this stuff advocating for this stuff 10 years ago. Well, it's here now. You wanted these international supply chains to fail because you wanted it all. Now is your opportunity, but all of a sudden everybody's like, what does that mean? Like, no, it means that, like, yeah, you're gonna have to like put your jet ski in the backyard and get busy like building this thing. And
that's one thing that I've noticed. Why is there still a computer chip shortage 2 years into this? Why, like you said, has no one taken the initiative to push this thing forward and start something new, right? And go with that, and try to shift out of this massive transnational supply chain problem, which evidently it is. But yeah, I think that's a really great example of where you see people have a perfect opportunity to change something and they've done absolutely nothing.
Well, I think that there, it's this fear thing of, it's easy to stick a seed in the dirt. It's not easy to get fruit or vegetables from that seed, because it requires a certain amount of dedication. You can't just disappear on yourself and go be a loser. And I think that that's been bred into like the concept of freedom in our society is, 50 forms of being a loser. I mean, that, like, for me, it's like, it's the revolution doesn't come in a bottle. I thought freedom was getting pickled, doing coke, going, F you, I'm not doing this. Little did I know that I was like fully like a slave to the thing. And then, I learned that freedom is ultimately responsibilities. Like, as ironic as that is the more you're responsible for real things in this life, the freer you get, because you ultimately have to take responsibility for yourself. And you're like, oh, like, it's up to me to raise my children. Oh, it's up to me to do this. Oh, it's up to me to figure out how to do that. Oh, it's up to me to take care of my body. If I don't want to be dependent upon the healthcare system, well, I need to take care of myself and not eat a bunch of sugar, which is I've been doing really good at this year. Like,
Yeah, that's what I need to start thinking of. The sugar, definitely.
Well, that's where I think that a lot of where we're struggling as people right now is, again, we're looking for someone to tell us what to do. And it's like that Pink Floyd song, right? That you're waiting for the starting gun, and it's already, that it's already, the starting gun's already been shot, dude. Like, the race is running, dude. You don't have any time to figure out what to do. You need to start doing it, or waiting around for someone. Like, and I think it's here. That's why, again, I'm going to recommend the Battleground Melbourne, because it's very interesting how a couple people showed up and just kept showing up, and more people kept showing up because people kept showing up. And ultimately, it's very interesting, because there's a moment in the thing where all the leaders get arrested and like knocked out of the thing, and then the next day just all the people show up, like not leaderless. And I think that that's why I'm a little weary of the mandate celebrity culture thing, is because they seem to be saying, look at us. And I go, no, what you want, if you're truly trying to stop this thing, you need to go, don't look at me, look at yourself and ask yourself, who is in charge in your community? And then you go be in charge of your community. You go be a leader in your community, and stop acting like a child, and like take responsibility for your actions, and realize that, like, it's super difficult, but it's relatively easy too at the same time. It's horrifyingly easier than most people want. And I think that's what scares people. Like, to become an effective change in your community is a lot easier than you would think. And ultimately, the responsibility comes real quick, where suddenly they're looking at you and you're like, what's the answer? I get that all the time. Like, I had a gal who is the teacher, like, she's like, this teacher has this private school. She tracked me down at my church the other day. She's like, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you. Because you put together the thing with at City Hall about the letter and the whole thing. She's like, I want to talk to you about like starting a school up in the mountains. Wait, I'm going to run out of power. Wait just 1 second, Stuart.
Go for the charger. I've been there before in Zoom classes. There we go.
Are we going to make it?
I was just saying I've been there before in Zoom classes.
And so she was like, she came up to me at church and she's like, I've been looking to talk to you. And she's like, I have this land, I have this thing. And I thought she was talking to me to tell me what she was doing. Like, this is what I'm doing. And she's looking at me and I'm like, oh, she's going, what are we doing? You're the leader here. And I'm looking at her going, you're the like revered, like preschool teacher lady, like who's been teaching all the kids, who's like the school to get your kids into. And she's coming to me going, so what are we doing? I got all this ache. And I'm like, it like hit me this thing where like, she's not telling me, she's going, what are we doing? Like, what are we? And I'm like, whoa, dude. And I go like, it's that hectic.
Yeah, I think people definitely look for others to lead them in all aspects. And the more I think you do that, though, you ultimately get more experience of people letting you down, right? And I think maybe you should reach a point where you've had enough letdowns from people that have made promises and not lived up to them, where you should be able to think, well, maybe it's time for me to do something about it.
Well, I think that's why I always try to convey that thing, even when I'm doing, is like, look, man, it's up to you. I need to empower you. I need you to walk beside me, not behind me. Like, I'm not going to follow you either. So but like this is what we do. And I go, look, I'm just some dude who just realized that the door opens. It's not locked. Like, it says locked on it. It fully says it's locked. Do not enter. And I go, but that doesn't just walk through the door. And you're like, oh. So, I'm more hopeful. But I do see that the whole thing's broken. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any saving the system. I think
I'm not sure where I put myself, the hopeful or pessimistic camp at this point. I'm not sure. I think if we keep going down the road that we're on, I don't think it's going to be very good for anyone. But I think there are maybe opportunities for the perhaps small scale solutions like we've been kind of talking about here. But yeah, like you said, overall, the institutional structure, I think, is so fundamentally broken that there's not much that can be done to fix that.
Yeah. I don't have any faith in hanging on to it anymore. I think that it needs to come crashing down for the benefit of us all. I do. If I watch the historical ebb and flows, I think that propping up the system at this point is just prolonging it and is going to be more painful. I think we've been in this thing for a decade where it's been like they've been propping it up. And I think the pain's got to come. But I think for those of us who are aware, I don't think it's going to be that painful for us because we're not going to be the ones sitting there like with our mouths open, like, oh my God, like what happened? Like there's no more pepperoni pizza at no. No, there's no more pepperoni pizza unless you've got a cow in the backyard that so but I do think we have all the bits and pieces once that's where like I get a little bit worried about some of the mentality of the real right and the real lefties is because they're system destroyers. And I go, no, what we need is a system implosion where everything stays intact, but it just collapses in on itself. I think that there's enough. I think there's enough people that understand like the power of the justice system, for example, and the systems. And there's enough system people that we want to keep the system. I think we just need to let the elite power class implode in on themselves by just stepping away. That whole thing is just, what if you had a war and no one showed up, right?
Yeah, no, that's definitely an excellent solution. And that's what Einstein said was his solution to a peaceful world, right? Is that if it's what did he say? Something like a youth that refuses military service is the key to a warless world, something like that. So yeah. Just don't show up, don't participate in the structures and the institutions that are facilitating this destruction of our society.
Well, I think that's a lot of where we're at this, where I'm very wary of like the rope-a-dope. I see the rope-a-dope happening now where it appears the system's fading back and these sort of gatekeeper people are in the place. And you're like, wait a minute, don't let these Tim Pools and all these kind of characters be your answer. Let them just do what they do, but use that space to really inform yourself about what you have that's intrinsically valuable. Like go understand that you can like get some books right now that will teach you things like go get your carpenter books and how to use tools and stuff now and just have them sitting there and like you don't even read them today. You know how to read, right? So And then you can open them up, be like, oh, okay, that's what I got to do, dude. I go out here and I cut that and I do this and I wire this to that and I'm up and running, dude. Or I'm waiting around for Joe Rogan to do push-ups in my front yard, dude, to power my house, dude.
Yeah.
I think Joe Rogan's the study. I'm not a big fan of his DMT thing and his hyper stoner thing, but he seems to have dropped that in the last year during this whole thing. I notice he isn't up there like hyping it like he did, because he's trying to I think they've geared him up or like, look, you're gonna have to drop the weed and the DMT thing if you want to have these like heavyweight people that we're farming into you. Because it's like the no agenda guys that were asking, like, who's his bookers? Like, that's where his CIA nodes are. So who's booking all these people onto Rogan, dude? That's, so I think he's a very interesting guy to keep your eye on, right? I'm not discounting him on at any level of what he's influencing, but I definitely am like, I'm waiting for the
shift.
The shift of like, oh, there it is. Cause they all do it eventually. It's big money, man. I don't know if you can trust someone who's raking in $100 million, dude.
Yeah, very fair point.
I maybe you can, maybe you can't. I don't know, dude. Like, what's $100 million, right? He's got kids too. Maybe not. I don't know. Who knows who any of these people are, really, right?
Yeah.
So what are we going to call our show? I think we should probably wrap it up, but what do you think? We need to give it a name.
Yeah, I don't know. We can think on that though, definitely.
Think about that, and maybe next time we'll pre-coordinate with some more of a coordinated topic and to do this every 2 weeks on a Saturday, and it is Saturday, right?
Yeah.
Because I could sit here and talk to you all night, Stuart. Like,
yeah, same.
About what's going on, because I don't know.
Yeah, there's just so much going on. I think that's the problem.
Well, I don't even think we're even over the target right now. Like, I don't even think the target is anywhere in our range with what is going on. Like, I know there's international stuff that's probably pretty prevalent to, like, I think what's going on in Kazakhstan deserves a full, but in 2 weeks it'll have developed, right? We'll know more, because there's something interesting going on over there. What Putin's up to, I think, is a real big question. One
very interesting headline I saw, it might have been yesterday or today. It said Russia is preparing a false flag attack in the Ukraine. And this was coming out of all the big mainstream Western news outlets.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting term for you guys to be using, because it hasn't been in your vocabulary up until now when you want to turn it on the Russians.
I'm a Putin fan. I don't know. Do you remember when I used to do those what was the periscopes? I used to do periscopes before work on the way to the job site. What, this must have been 6 or 7 years ago. And we used to have our whole Putin bit, about Putin and who, like, Putin, dude. And I there's something about that dude and what they're up to where I just go, I think they're almost the state version of what I'm talking about. Like, let's just back away and let's kind of like dig our old stuff up, and let's let these idiots sort of just spin out about whatever weirdness they're spinning out about. And if you come mess with us, we're gonna nuke you. So suck it, dude. And I think that they've been so busy trying to hang a dunce placard on Putin for years now, and he just isn't biting. Like, he just won't bite. He's very interesting. I find him to be a fascinating character.
Yeah, he definitely is. He's definitely not an angel, but yeah, definitely fascinating.
No, you can't be an angel running the Russia. But he's done some of those things where he lambasted those those corporate goons, dude, they're not where he was like, you guys aren't doing. Remember when he had the table, the dude and the guy who was running the one of the oligarchs there who was blowing it with one of the factories, and he was just ripped him a new a-hole, going like, dude, what are you doing, dude? Like, you can't not take care of, like, I do believe that there's a certain level of anarchy over there that we as on the West just cannot grasp. Like, I look at a lot of those Russian Instagram pages, and just what is going on over there. So next level of just hillbilly. And I'm like, there's something charming about that too. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's also interesting you put it like that's the state level of the opposition that we're talking about. There are a few outliers like that, and I think we've seen over the last 20 years the Western world, the Anglo-Americans in particular, have tried to hammer and destroy each of these individual places, and they've been successful in a few of them and not so successful in others. So yeah, these places definitely do exist in terms of something that stands in opposition.
Yeah, and I think, it's like when the wall fell, right? Like, it's, I was like prime at when that all went down. I remember having a chunk of the wall for a while and the whole thing, and it's like, when the bluff of the Soviet Empire finally like faded, and you realize they were essentially still in the 1930s. Like, but they'd spruced up some of their stuff to look like they were super modern and had some, but when you see those old, the hangars with the half-built space shuttles in them and stuff, and some funky hangar out there in the middle of the sticks, you're like, oh, okay, these guys were totally bluffing, dude. The home of the Potemkin villages and stuff. These guys were masterminds at facade puppeteering for propaganda purposes, and I think that I think they're pros at it. I think they're fully like, look, dude, just keep on walking, man. You guys, because they don't really seem to be like making any, like, yeah, you can get all like, again, I look through the propaganda and I just don't see it, dude. And I listen to what Putin has to say, and he's just like, suck it, you guys. That's what I like about him. He's just like, suck it, dude. Go. Get out of here, dude. I get a kick out of him, man.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting one. Lots of those kind of strongman leaders definitely fall into that very interesting category, to say.
But he's the kind of guy, like, I think that I could go have a full conversation with and sit there and like chuckle and be like, all right. So, and he's like, yeah, I think he's the kind of guy who's like,
yeah, I'd much rather.
You want to see the bunker?
Yeah, I'd much rather have a conversation with a Vladimir Putin or someone like this instead of a Boris Johnson.
Oh, all day long.
It's just fluff when you look at.
You can't deny the pictures of him riding bare chested on horseback and wrestling bears and the whole thing. Like, there's something so like, that's kind of what you expect out of a leaders. I want to like, he's a good, he's photogenic on that department. He looks the part, you know what I mean? Like, he looks like an asset running the country, dude. Like,
yeah. And the interesting thing also is domestically, there's obviously large groups of people that hate these leaders, but then when there's external force supplied to try to overthrow these leaders, never works out as the Western world thinks it will. But if you look at Iraq, for instance, nobody likes Saddam Hussein, who lived in Iraq, but they absolutely hated a Western force coming over and militarily destroying their country. And what did that do? That sent all of them against the invaders, right? Even though the invaders were supposed to bring in freedom and justice and democracy and all these liberal values. Well, when you destroy someone's home, destroy their water supply, their electricity supply, their food supply, doesn't tend to send you in their direction. Right? It sends you in completely the opposite direction.
I always trip on Iraq because I used to work with this Iraqi gal, and we were about the same age. And she had, she lived in Baghdad and the whole thing. And she's like, look, man, this is totally messed up, dude. Cause she's like, we used to be able to go to school. It was a fully normal society, like, so to speak. Like, it was like, they destroyed my home, dude. Like she was super not that stoked about it. And she told stories about cruise missiles creeping around her neighborhood when in Iraq 1, dude, when she was a little girl, dude. And she was like, look, man, you can say what you want about the stuff, but it wasn't like that. It wasn't worth destroying all of it, dude. And she was like, it ain't cool. She was, but she was, she was pretty, dude, for a girl, so she was my age. So I was working with her. She was like 22, 23 at the time. She was you wouldn't have known she was Iraq walking by her. She looked as Western as anybody, spoke perfect English. And then you talk to her and she's like, yeah, fully.
There's another kind of interesting point along those lines is most people in the third world, developing world, whatever you want to call it, they look up to the Western world. And wherever you see images in Africa, what do you see all the kids running around in? Soccer jerseys, right, from their favorite teams in the Western world. Well, when you go in, and what does the Western world actually do to these places? Destroys them, turns them completely upside down. You lose all of the goodwill. You lose any moral high ground that you had, and you've just completely not only set that country back decades, but you've set your own objectives back decades. So yeah, for me, the war and peace is kind of my big issue area, which
I think that's one of the things that, if you really, what we're up against as a society is it's sort of like the alcoholic. I think we have to face ourselves and make some serious amends on the global scale. Is I've never been cool with what we've done. I mean, the trail of wreckage around this planet in the name of me, and to me, one of the shameful things of our society is not owning it, right? One of my issues is look, we are a bloodthirsty warrior society. And we pretend that we're not. And I've always been struck at the oddity of that, because as a person who believes in peace and nonviolence and all this stuff, I'm like a full warrior. And I go, at least just, if we just said what it is we're up to, then we can make a decision about it. But this half mealy mouth, I go, no, don't do that. Don't do the America rah rah. Go, no, that's the one thing. One of the couple things I liked about Trump was when he was straight up about it. He's like, well, we want to blow him up for oil. Where's our oil? And I go, let's call it a spade. Let's at least own that we went and smushed a very prosperous Northern African country out of spite. Let's just own that. We didn't need to do that to Libya. We did that out of spite, man.
Yeah, Libya, I think, was the one for me that really sent me on this direction in life of exploring all these issues.
Well, we're doing it in Yemen right now, and people have no idea.
Because I remember Libya specifically because I was out skating in England with my friend, and I was just scrolling on Twitter when we'd come to a stop, and it said the UK and France had begun a bombing mission in Libya. And I was just stood there like, what is happening? Why are we doing this? Have we not seen enough of the examples of this clearly doesn't work over the past decade?
Well, it's I have a big problem with the people that are about, our southern border issue. I go, look, man, we have been terrorizing the Central and South America for the last 150 years. I go, that term banana republic didn't just come out of nowhere. That's our policies of what we were doing in the name of United Fruit Co. We were
this is the same thing in Europe with the migration crisis, right? And we have all these people on the right which were also the same ardent supporters of the war on terror, and we need to destroy Iraq and get Saddam and get those weapons of mass destruction. Well, okay, well, do you want to deal with the consequences of that? Which is going to be these millions of people that are absolutely desperate for anything they can get, right? If you break it, you bought it, right? And I don't think people want to consider that at all. But I think that's super important. And you have something also that you mentioned there about the bloodthirsty society. I know we're trying to wrap this up, but like you said, we can just go on and on. Last semester, I taught a class called International Security and tried to explore all these issues. And one of the big things that I got into was this very point, that the Western world presents itself as being the arbiter of truth and freedom and justice and democracy. But what does it actually do, even in conflicts, which are really in the mainstream in that light, such as World War II? Look at what happened in Germany in World War II, thanks to the British Bomber Command and the firebombing of cities in Germany, such as Dresden, which had absolutely nothing to do with the conflict at all. It was purely based on revenge. Same in Japan. Japan is completely firebombed prior to the nukes being dropped. And you look at the books and stuff I've read, and the stories of what happened there are horrific. You're talking about people that were, the air is on fire in these places, right? And people jumped into rivers to try to survive, and they were boiled alive, literally boiled alive in the rivers. So this, and the fact that we can't confront this stuff, I think is really dangerous. And you just can't fall into this perspective of, well, we're bringing positive benefits to the world. Well, maybe in some cases, yeah, but what are the other things that you're bringing along with it?
Well, it's that thing of like, I don't regret the past, nor do I shut the door on it. I think that there's this weird thing where, like, looking at our narrative as a nation and a society, that we can't, that to look at that is to say I'm against the society. Like, I've argued this forever. A true patriot of this country is willing to acknowledge what we've done here, and hopefully to make some sort of reckoning over time, to be like, look, man, like, we own that bill. We live in a society where, like, look, we don't get to own the mission system, right? The mission system of the West Coast of the Spanish colonies that are now California and stuff like that's. I don't have to own that. I wasn't part of the mission system and all that stuff. But my lineage comes from what was the settlement of the West and the policies put forth by the United States government, which were legalizing and justifying through law the genocide of Plains Indians. I mean, it was codified in law, voted on in the Capitol building, and when people don't want to acknowledge that, and I go, how can we ever overcome this schism in our society without acknowledging the trauma that it is and what has occurred? And I think that one of the tropes that's put out is this slavery issue. And I go, look, man, as much empathy as I have on that narrative for the ADOS people, I go, they got to live, generationally speaking. I mean, the atrocity of the genocidal nature of that happened to some of these original people, they don't get to sit here and talk about it. Like, they're gone, like they're gone. And I think that that's one of the real hard conversations that's being bypassed with, oh, it's this and that. Well, the same machine that did that then is doing this now. It's the same machine. It's the same people that got, I think you look at what what Sherman did at the end of the Civil War, and his like, look, we're not going to hold any of these, just return home, and we're not going to bring any of these people and hold them accountable, arguably was a humanitarian thing at the time. I think that wasn't, but at the same time, all those people who ran that show disappeared into the woodwork, and I think have been reconstituting over the years, no different than the people who escaped Nazi Germany in the rat lines. So imagine the Nazis who escaped via the rat lines rejoining up with the same people that melted it back into society after the Civil War as these people that didn't have to be held accountable either. And here you are, this sort of new political monolith that is now encompassed our society. Like I really see it as it is Civil War Part 2, and that's why they don't want us to dig into it, because it's the same characters from what I can tell. It really, and the same institutions and the same thing, and
yeah, those the Nuremberg trials kind of fall into this category as well. There was just a handful of people that got prosecuted at the Nuremberg trials, but most people walked away.
Well, you look at how they were divvying up, how it was at the end, it was just the divvy up of all these people and who could bribe their way out and who had knowledge and this and that. And I think that's what, I think that works right. I think that's where we short circuit ourselves as human beings, by short lensing the historical narrative of what really is going on with this ritualistic war footing of our society. And don't even get me into the timeline issue, but like they all seem to be like countering, moving into the narratives, just keep like step laddering to this thing where you look at that. Who was the guy from the 1800s who wrote it all down? They always like the Mason guy. They always get on him, but like, it seems pretty obvious, World War I fed right into World War II, which fed right into the Cold War, which gets us here. And it's the same corporations all along,
and the same mindset.
Yeah, it's really the same thing. And I think that when you kind of unlock that narrative, it does become a little bit clear of like what we're up against. Is like, these are people that are generationally doing this. This isn't a bunch of like, I just showed up to the party, guys, and let's do this. These are people that have been passed on generational data points to work off of and grids, and we're just sort of waking up to it and having to do the hard work like in real time, versus they're sitting back like, well, we know what we're doing.
Which kind of brings us full circle back to the power elites.
Yeah, it's right.
That's perfect. Exactly what Mills says.
Well, well, my hopeful thing is where I've realized something personally is I'm the elite. They're not elite. They're actually just lower dimensional carbon copies of themselves. They're carbon life forms, right? Like, I do believe that once you tap into the spirituality and God and the whole thing, you no longer are these carbon copy life forms, which the elite are. And I think that's why they're so afraid. I do believe that one of the things they're afraid of is this personal autonomy, which I don't think you can have personal autonomy without like God consciousness, whatever that is for you. Like, I don't dictate path. I just saying that sort of deeper understanding of the cosmos and your place in it, and how much actual intergalactic power you contain is I think what they're afraid of is, and I think that's where bumping back into Joe Rogan. That's why I've always been a little dubious of his thing, because I do believe that one of the short circuiting of that energy is these drugs and using drugs to replace actual like life. And the thing, because I think they're afraid of us. I think they're terrified of us. And especially those of us who are ready to melt it back into the background, like the Viet Cong. Like I do believe we are the spiritual Viet Cong. Like, I mean, Ho Chi Minh showed us how to do it, dude. The George Washington of Vietnam, right?
Yeah, Vietnam's
I do think that one of the things that does give me hope is the fact that the superpower armed military industrial complex cannot beat a guerrilla insurgency. And I think that once you remove the weaponry from the guerrilla insurgency, now you're even more untraceable. Like now it's just non-compliance. I really do think that they're terrified of this non-compliance thing on a massive level. Like, like what do we do now? We're trying to fire up the like people that get violent. They need actually like lunatics to like crack and
Yeah, definitely. Unless you have consent, you cannot really rule a population, especially in a place that's supposed to be a democracy.
Well, that's the interesting part, right? Well, on that is so let's we'll be back in 2 weeks, everybody, and by then we'll have a name for our show. This is our inaugural version, so I'm fired up. You can bring a guest on, whatever you want to do, Stuart. Like I'm into like learning, and if you want to turn this into like an educational thing, like more of a college lecture format, like just even the bits about C. Wright Mills, man, and just that I'm way into learning because
that sounds great. I would, like I said, highly recommend that book to everyone though. It's very approachable. It's not super academic at all.
All right,
and
let's put this on class. This is your reading assignment. C. Wright Mills, Power Elite.
It's about $20 as well. It's a cheap little book if you want to get a new. There's tons of used copies around.
All right, I'm gonna order one right now and do my homework.
Awesome. Do you want to see one quick article before we go, which we didn't get to, but I thought this one was just
got it queued up. Let's check it out.
A crazy interesting one. Yeah, so look at this. I was trying to take a nap earlier and I was laying down in bed scrolling through Twitter and I saw this headline and my mind was just immediately, what did that say? So US FAA reviews FedEx proposal to install A321 laser-based missile defense system. So yeah, this is real. This is on Reuters. FedEx wants to put laser defense systems on its planes, which can shoot down heat-seeking missiles. So this is kind of the ultimate, I think, evolution of the military industrial complex really becoming uncloaked, and we're seeing the corporate world fully colliding into the military industry world. And yeah, I just thought this was a crazy headline. It really just blew my mind. No, don't want to spend too much time discussing it here, but it's kind of just a last interesting point to finish on for everyone to just kind of go and take a look at.
Dude, you just you did just blow my mind.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Why would that FedEx need that?
It's almost like they think threats to this system are about to get hot, perhaps.
Well, that's like a thing where people aren't paying attention, like the completion of the internment, the health spas and the health spa internment camps in Australia aren't supposed to be completed till I believe 2024, right? So they're investing money now on something. So they're obviously more. That's like one of those things. There's obviously more going on. That's a clue, right? They don't need to have an article about that, but I think what I do believe about the system, right, is they have to tell you what they're doing. And that's one of the cosmic laws is, the fine print, the the vampires contractors, they're like, no, let's check it out. So you're like, well, why would I even care about that? And you're like, well, obviously FedEx is concerned that people are going to be firing heat-seeking missiles at their jets.
Mm-hmm.
Has that ever happened? Maybe it's happening more than we think.
Right.
You never know.
Yeah, Elysium is coming soon.
Wow, dude, that is some trippy. That's the way to end the show, dude.
Went out with a big old bang.
I'm super fired up, dude. I enjoy talking with you, my friend. So I look forward to it. We'll be back next 2 weeks from this Saturday for another episode of, I don't know what to call it yet, but Stuart's going to ask his class.
Yeah, we'll figure out something. But yeah, definitely awesome to always talk to you, Hamish, for sure.
All right,
I always learn something.
Thanks for keeping your brain alive.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks for hanging out.